Harlem never truly slept in the summer of 1948. Even at 3 in the morning, the streets still carried the sound of distant music, laughter drifting out of late-night clubs, and the quiet footsteps of people who lived their lives after midnight. But on one particular night, something happened in a narrow alley off Lenox Avenue that people in Harlem would talk about for years. It was the kind of moment that could change enemies into something else. And at the center of it all was a man whose name already carried power across the neighborhood. Bumpy Johnson. Most people in Harlem knew Bumpy Johnson by reputation. He wasn't the loudest man in the room, and he didn't chase attention. But when he walked into a club like Small's Paradise, conversations paused for just a second, not out of fear alone, but out of respect. Bumpy had built his name over decades in the streets of Harlem. People said he controlled the numbers game, protected local businesses, and kept order where chaos could easily take over. Some called him a gangster. Others called him a protector of the neighborhood. The truth, like most things in Harlem, lived somewhere in between. But there was another name moving through the streets at that time, a man who believed Harlem was ready for new leadership. His name was Sonny Mitchell. Younger, ambitious, and eager to prove himself, Sonny had started pushing his way into territories that many believed belonged to Bumpy Johnson. What began as quiet competition slowly turned into something far more dangerous. Crews watched each other closely. Rumors spread on street corners. Everyone could feel the tension building. By the summer of 1948, the rivalry between the two men had become the talk of the neighborhood. Barbershop conversations often ended with the same question: who would win if things finally exploded? Some believed Bumpy's experience and reputation made him untouchable. Others thought Sonny's hunger and ambition might change the balance of power. Either way, people understood that when two strong men refused to step back, the streets usually pay the price. On that July night, Bumpy Johnson had just finished settling a small dispute between two numbers runners. It wasn't unusual for people to bring their problems to him. In many ways, he acted like a quiet judge of the streets, someone who could calm situations before they grew worse. After the meeting ended, he stepped out into the warm Harlem night and started walking toward his car. The city felt strangely calm. A few late-night workers moved along the sidewalks. A taxi rolled slowly down the avenue. Somewhere in the distance, music from a jazz club drifted through the air. For a moment, it looked like just another night in Harlem. Then Bumpy heard something. At first it was faint, almost lost beneath the noise of the city. But to someone who had spent decades on these streets, the sound was unmistakable. It was a desperate, uneven breathing of someone in serious trouble. Bumpy paused. The sound was coming from a dark alley nearby. Most people would have kept walking. Harlem was full of situations that were better left alone, especially in the middle of the night. But Bumpy Johnson wasn't most people. He turned and slowly stepped into the alley. What he saw stopped him cold. A young man lay on the ground, barely moving, his body struggling to breathe. The boy looked no older than 19 or 20. His clothes were expensive, his shoes polished, but none of that mattered now. He was clearly in danger, fighting for his life in the shadows of an alley where no one else seemed to notice. Bumpy knelt beside him and checked his pulse. It was weak. Then his eyes landed on something that changed everything. A gold ring on the young man's finger. The initials engraved on it were simple but unforgettable. The moment Bumpy read those letters, the entire situation became something far bigger than a stranger in trouble. Because the boy lying there wasn't just anyone. He was the son of Sonny Mitchell, the same man who had been trying to bring Bumpy Johnson down. For a long moment, Bumpy stood in that alley, staring at the dying young man. The streets were quiet again, as if the whole city was waiting to see what he would do next. He could walk away. No one would know. And if Sonny Mitchell's son never made it through the night, the balance of power in Harlem might change forever. But Bumpy Johnson was a man who lived by his own code, and the choice he made in the next few seconds would shock everyone who later heard the story. For a few seconds, the alley felt completely still. The only sound was the weak breathing of the young man on the ground. Bumpy Johnson looked down at him again, and there was no mistake. The ring, the face, the clothes. This was clearly the son of Sonny Mitchell. The same Sonny Mitchell who had been trying to take control of Harlem. The same man whose crew had been clashing with Bumpy's people for months. Bumpy slowly stood up and looked around the alley. No witnesses, no cars passing by, just the quiet streets of Harlem in the early morning hours. If anyone walked by later, they might simply assume the boy had gotten himself into trouble. Things like that happen more often than people like to admit. The young man on the ground moved slightly, his body shaking as he tried to breathe. It was clear something was terribly wrong. In those days, heroin had begun spreading through parts of the city, and it was changing the streets in ways many people didn't fully understand yet. Some young men thought they were just chasing excitement, not realizing how dangerous that road could be. Bumpy had seen it before. He had watched promising lives slowly fall apart because of it. Kids who thought they were strong enough to handle anything, only to find themselves trapped by something they didn't control anymore. It was one of the few things that truly bothered him about what was happening in Harlem. He looked down again at Sonny Mitchell's son. For a long moment, Bumpy didn't move. The rivalry between him and Sonny Mitchell had been building for nearly 2 years. It had started quietly at first. Small disagreements about territory, whispers about who controlled which part of the neighborhood. But little by little, things became more serious. Sonny Mitchell was younger, ambitious, and determined to prove himself. He believed Harlem was ready for new leadership, and he wasn't shy about saying it. His crew had started moving into areas that many believed belonged to Bumpy Johnson. They set up operations, spoke loudly about changing the balance of power, and acted like the old rules no longer applied. People across Harlem were watching all unfold. Some said Sonny was brave. Others said he was reckless. But one thing everyone agreed on was that he wasn't afraid of Bumpy Johnson. That alone made him dangerous. There had already been several tense moments between their crews. Nothing that exploded into open chaos yet, but enough that people could feel the pressure building. Store owners talked quietly about it. Musicians whispered about it backstage at clubs. Even taxi drivers had their opinions about which side would eventually come out on top. And now, in the middle of that rivalry, Bumpy Johnson was standing in a dark alley looking down at Sonny Mitchell's only son. The young man tried to speak, but the words never fully came out. His breathing grew uneven again, and he looked terrified, like someone who suddenly realized just how serious the situation had become. Bumpy looked toward the mouth of the alley again. The street outside was still quiet. If he walked away right now, no one would ever connect him to what happened here. In fact, some people might even assume Sonny Mitchell had lost control of his own family. But the situation wasn't that simple, because Bumpy Johnson had always followed certain rules in life, even when the world around him didn't. People in Harlem often said that was what made him different. He believed a man's reputation wasn't only built on power, it was also built on the choices he made when nobody was watching. Behind him, the young man made another weak sound. Bumpy slowly turned back toward him. The decision sitting in front of him was bigger than just one night in an alley. It was tied to pride, loyalty, and a rivalry that had been shaping Harlem for months. And whatever Bumpy Johnson chose to do next could change everything between him and Sonny Mitchell forever. For another long moment, Bumpy Johnson just stood there in the alley, staring down at the young man. The boy's breathing was uneven now, each breath sounding weaker than the one before. It was clear he didn't have much time. Bumpy had lived long enough to recognize when someone was in serious danger. The streets had taught him many things, and one of them was how quickly a life could slip away. But this situation was different. This wasn't just another stranger lying in trouble. This was the son of Sonny Mitchell, the same Sonny Mitchell who had been trying to take Harlem from him, the same man whose crew had been spreading rumors that Bumpy Johnson was losing his grip on the neighborhood. Bumpy slowly rubbed his chin as he looked down at the boy again. The kid looked young, too young to be caught up in the kind of world his father lived in. His clothes suggested he had grown up comfortable, probably never imagining he would end up lying helpless in a dark alley. The boy tried to move again, his hand weakly scraping against the pavement. It wasn't a strong movement. It looked more like someone reaching for help without even knowing who might be there. For a second, Bumpy thought about Sonny Mitchell. He remembered the first time he heard Sonny's name floating through Harlem. Back then, Sonny was just another ambitious young man trying to build a reputation. But over time, things had changed. Sonny had gathered crew, made connections, and started pushing deeper into territory that people said belonged to Bumpy. At first, Bumpy ignored it. Harlem was a big place, and new faces appeared every year trying to make something for themselves. But Sonny Mitchell wasn't satisfied with a small piece of city. He wanted influence. He wanted recognition. And most of all, he wanted people to believe that Bumpy Johnson's era was coming to an end. That kind of talk spread fast. Barbershops buzzed with it. Musicians talked about it between sets. Even men who worked the late-night diners had heard the stories. Some believed Sonny Mitchell might actually challenge Bumpy. Others said that was a dangerous mistake, because Bumpy Johnson had built his reputation over many years. He understood Harlem better than most people ever would. He knew the business owners, the families, the streets, and the people who depended on stability in the neighborhood. And despite everything people said about him, Bumpy had a certain code he followed. That code was something many people respected, even if they didn't always admit it out loud. Now that code was standing face to face with reality in a dark alley. Bumpy looked down again at the young man struggling to breathe. If this boy didn't survive the night, the news would travel quickly. Sonny Mitchell would be devastated. Some people might say it was just another tragedy in a rough city, but others might wonder whether Bumpy Johnson had something to do with it. Rumors in Harlem had a way of growing faster than truth, and if Sonny believed Bumpy had been anywhere near his son that night, the fragile tension between their crews could explode into something far worse. Bumpy could already imagine how that might look. Men choosing sides, whispers turning into accusations, a conflict that would drag the entire neighborhood into the middle. Behind him, the boy let out another weak sound, almost like he was trying to call for help again. Bumpy glanced toward the street one more time. The city was still quiet, but the choice in front of him was getting heavier by the second, because whatever he decided to do in that moment wouldn't just affect the young man lying in the alley. It could shape the future of the rivalry between Bumpy Johnson and Sonny Mitchell, and maybe even change the balance of power in Harlem itself. The alley felt smaller with every passing second. Bumpy Johnson stood there in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The young man on the ground was getting weaker. His breathing came in short, uneven bursts, like his body was fighting a battle it was slowly losing. Bumpy had seen men collapse before. Harlem streets had shown him every kind of struggle a person could face. But this situation carried a different kind of pressure. This wasn't just about life and death. It was about what would come afterward. Because the boy lying there was the son of Sonny Mitchell. And Sonny Mitchell was not the kind of man who accepted loss quietly. Bumpy looked down again at the young man's face. Even in the dim light of the alley, he could see the fear in the boy's eyes. It was a look of someone who suddenly realized the world wasn't as safe as it once seemed. For a moment, Bumpy remembered something from years earlier. Back when he first started building his reputation in Harlem, an older man once told him something that stuck with him. A man's real character shows when nobody else is around. Right now, nobody was around. No witnesses, no crew members, no one to judge what he did next. The street outside remained quiet. A distant car passed somewhere far down the avenue, but the sound faded quickly. Harlem was still half asleep. The boy's hand moved again, weakly gripping Bumpy's pant leg for a second before slipping away. It wasn't strong enough to hold on, but it was enough to remind Bumpy that time was running out. If the young man didn't get help soon, the situation could turn tragic. Bumpy slowly stepped back and looked toward the alley entrance again. His car was parked just down the block. Harlem Hospital wasn't too far either. A fast drive to get someone there quickly, if there was still time. But nothing about this situation was simple. If Bumpy suddenly showed up at the hospital carrying Sonny Mitchell's son, questions would follow immediately. Word traveled fast in Harlem. Within hours, people would be whispering about it on every street corner. Some might say Bumpy was trying to prove a point. Others might think it was some kind of strategy. And Sonny might believe something entirely different. Bumpy could already picture that moment. Sonny standing there, hearing that his son had been found in an alley and brought in by the very man he considered his biggest rival. Would Sonny see it as help, or would he see it as something else entirely? Behind him, the young man let out another faint breath. The sound broke the silence of the alley again. Bumpy Johnson looked down at him one more time. The rivalry between him and Sonny Mitchell had already pushed Harlem close to the edge. What he did in the next few moments could either calm the storm or make it far worse, and the decision had to be made now. Bumpy Johnson stood there for one more second, then another. The alley felt heavier with every breath the young man struggled to take. Bumpy looked down again and realized something that made the situation even more dangerous than he first thought. The boy wasn't alone earlier. There were faint footprints in the dirt near the wall, more than just his. Someone had been here with him not long ago. Maybe friends. Maybe people who panicked and ran when things went wrong. That meant something else too. Someone out there might already know where Sonny Mitchell's son had been tonight. Bumpy felt a quiet tension settle in his chest. Harlem was full of watchful eyes. If word spread that Sonny Mitchell's son had been seen in trouble, and if someone claimed they saw Bumpy Johnson nearby, the story could twist into something ugly before sunrise. The young man made another weak sound behind him, pulling Bumpy's attention back. His eyes were barely open now. Bumpy crouched beside him again, studying his face more carefully. The kid was young, maybe 19. Too young to understand the kind of world his father had stepped into years ago. Too young to be caught in the middle of a rivalry that had nothing to do with him. But Harlem didn't care about age when trouble came knocking. Bumpy exhaled slowly. The streets had always been a chessboard. Every move carried consequences. Every decision created another reaction somewhere else. And right now, this moment felt like the kind of move that could shift the entire board. Then another thought crossed Bumpy's mind. What if Sonny Mitchell's crew was already looking for the boy? Sonny was known for keeping a close eye on his family. If his son had been missing all night, men would already be searching the streets. And if those men turned the corner and found Bumpy Johnson standing over the boy, that situation could turn dangerous in seconds. Bumpy imagined how it might look from the outside. His biggest rival's son lying helpless in an alley, and Bumpy Johnson standing right there beside him. No explanation in the world would sound convincing in the middle of the night. A faint rumble of a car engine echoed somewhere nearby, rolling slowly down Lenox Avenue. Bumpy glanced toward the mouth of the alley again. Headlights briefly passed across the street before fading away, but the sound reminded him of something important. Time wasn't just running out for the young man. It was running out for Bumpy too, because the longer he stood here thinking, the more likely it became that someone else would step into this alley and see a scene that could ignite the very war Harlem had been fearing for months. Behind him, Sonny Mitchell's son struggled to breathe again. Bumpy looked down at him, then toward the quiet street where his car waited. The next move would change everything. Bumpy Johnson, and once it happened, made his decision. There would be no taking it back. He bent down, slipped one arm under the young man's shoulders and the other under his legs, and lifted him carefully off the cold pavement. The boy was heavier than he looked, his body weak and barely responding, but Bumpy held him steady. For a second, he looked toward the empty street again, knowing that once he stepped out of that alley, there would be no hiding what he was doing. Then he walked. The warm Harlem night air hit them as he stepped onto Lenox Avenue. A couple of late-night pedestrians glanced over, confused by the sight of Bumpy Johnson carrying an unconscious young man through the quiet street. But Bumpy didn't slow down. His Cadillac was parked half a block away, and every second mattered. He opened the back door, laid the boy across the seat, then slid behind the wheel and started the engine. The hospital wasn't far, but the drive felt longer than usual. Bumpy kept glancing in the rearview mirror, checking if the boy was still breathing. The emergency entrance lights at Harlem Hospital cut through the darkness. When he finally pulled up inside, nurses rushed forward as soon as they saw the condition of the young man. Bumpy helped lift him onto a stretcher, while quickly explaining what little he knew. Within seconds, the staff pushed the boy through swinging doors toward the treatment room. And just like that, Bumpy Johnson was left standing alone in the hallway. The quiet felt strange after the tension of the alley. He sat down in a chair near the wall and waited. Minutes passed, then more. The sun hadn't even begun to rise when the hospital doors suddenly opened again. Several men rushed inside, their footsteps echoing through the hall. At the front of them was Sonny Mitchell. The moment Sonny saw Bumpy sitting there, he froze. His expression changed instantly, from panic to anger to something harder to read. The men behind him stepped forward slightly, watching the room carefully. For a few long seconds, no one spoke. Finally, Sonny looked toward the doors where his son had been taken. Then back at Bumpy. "You were the one who brought him here," he said quietly. Bumpy didn't stand. He simply nodded once. Sonny stared at him, trying to understand why the man he had been fighting for months would be sitting in a hospital waiting room beside his son. Before either man could say anything else, a doctor stepped out from the hallway. "He's stable," the doctor said. "It was close, but he's going to make it." The room fell silent. Sonny slowly turned back toward Bumpy Johnson. The anger that had filled his face when he walked in was gone now, replaced by something far more complicated. For the first time since their rivalry began, Sonny Mitchell lowered his head slightly, and in that quiet hospital hallway, the man who had sworn to defeat Bumpy Johnson finally understood something he had never expected about the man he called his enemy. The hospital hallway stayed quiet for a moment after the doctor walked away. Sonny Mitchell stood there, still trying to process everything he had just heard. His son was alive. Only minutes earlier he had been preparing himself for the worst. And now the man sitting across from him was a reason that nightmare hadn't come true. Sonny slowly walked toward the chair where Bumpy Johnson was sitting. For months, their names had been tied together in a different way. Rival crews, street tension, rumors about who would eventually control Harlem. People expected their conflict to explode sooner or later, but nobody expected to see them standing together in a hospital hallway at 4 a.m. Sonny stopped a few feet away from Bumpy. His crew stayed back, watching quietly. Even they looked unsure about what was happening. "You could have walked away," Sonny finally said. His voice was calm now, but there was weight behind the words. Bumpy leaned back slightly in the chair, looking tired after the long night. "Maybe," he answered, "but your son didn't deserve to be left there." Sonny glanced toward the hallway where the doctors had taken the boy. For the first time since he rushed into the hospital, the tension in his shoulders began to ease. "He's just a kid," Bumpy continued quietly. "Whatever problems you and I have, that's our business, not his." Sonny didn't respond right away. People in Harlem had always talked about Bumpy Johnson's code. Some believed it was real. Others thought it was just another story the streets liked to tell. But in that moment, standing in the hospital hallway, Sonny Mitchell saw it for himself. Bumpy hadn't helped his son for attention. There were no reporters here, no crowds watching, just two men who had spent months preparing to become enemies for life. Sonny reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. He held it out toward Bumpy. "For the hospital," he said, "and for what you did tonight." Bumpy glanced at it, but didn't take it. "You keep it," he replied. Sonny frowned slightly. "You saved my son's life." Bumpy stood up slowly and straightened his jacket. "I didn't do it for money." The two men looked at each other again. The rivalry that had been building across Harlem suddenly felt different now. Not gone completely, but changed in a way neither of them had expected. After a moment, Sonny slowly lowered the envelope. "You know people are going to hear about this," he said. Bumpy gave a small shrug. "People always hear about something in Harlem." Sonny almost smiled, but it faded quickly. He nodded once, a quiet sign of respect that very few people had ever seen him give. "Then they'll hear the truth," Sonny said. "That Bumpy Johnson saved my son when he didn't have to." Bumpy didn't respond to that. He simply started walking toward the hospital exit. By the time the sun began rising over Harlem, he was already back on the street. The neighborhood was slowly waking up, shop owners unlocking their doors, early taxis rolling past, musicians heading home after long nights. Life in Harlem kept moving forward like it always did, but the story of that night traveled fast. Within days, people were talking about it in barbershops, on street corners, and inside the same clubs where Bumpy Johnson was known to sit quietly in the corner. Some people were surprised. Others said it proved what they believed all along, that Bumpy Johnson lived by a code few men truly understood. As for Sonny Mitchell, something about him changed after that night too. The rivalry between the two men slowly cooled. The tension that once hung over the streets didn't disappear overnight, but it never reached the breaking point people had feared. And Sonny's son eventually recovered. Years later, Some people in Harlem would still tell the story about that quiet summer night in 1948. The night when a powerful man found his enemy's son dying in an alley and chose to save him instead. Because in a world where power often meant taking from others, Bumpy Johnson showed that sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is give someone another chance to live. And that was the part people never forgot.